Ruben Diaz Jr. I am the Bronx Borough President. I appreciate that you are all here, and I'm hoping that before we get, to the reason why we're here today, I just want to wish you all and your families a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a prosperous and healthy and safe New Year. I'm joined here with my colleagues in government. I'm here with the county exec, the Westchester County exec, my good friend and former colleague in the New York State Assembly, George Latimer. You'll be hearing from him shortly. I'm here with City Council member Mark Jonai, Assembly member Natalia Fernandez, Assembly member Mike Benedetto, and you'll hear from all of our friends here, President Hall, Lisa, Soren from the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and of course, Joe Kelleher. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because we are coming together, as we've done in the past, in unity, calling for, once again, for Amtrak to stop being a Scrooge, to get out of the way, to stop from getting in the way of progress for the 4 Metro North stations that are so desperately needed, not only in the Bronx, but for the city of New York, and as you can see here, for the entire region. This is not the first time that the county exec has joined us in this effort. He and I have done an op-ed together calling for the need of these 4 Metro North stations. So many of you have followed this. My colleagues in government have already voted on budgets and have already advocated to the governor, to the state of New York, to finance these 4 Metro North stations. This is not a new idea. This is an idea that's been kicked around for the better half of the last 3 decades. We have done scoping sessions. They have been well attended. Everyone knows that this is a good idea for commuters. Everyone knows the potential of job opportunities. Everyone realizes how we can increase density with residential units. Everyone knows that this is a way for us to address overcrowding in our public transit system. And everyone is on board, except for Amtrak. Every single time that Metro North and the MTA is ready to move forward and sign the agreement, they continue to push the goalposts backwards. So we're here to say to Amtrak, the days of the railroad robber barons are long gone. That mentality is antiquated. It is as antiquated as coal-running railroad engines. But if they still have that mentality, then maybe Santa Claus should give them coal for Christmas. And so I'm happy that I've been joined by my colleagues in government. I'm happy that I've been joined by George Latimer, who understands that this also helps the reverse commute from New York City and the Bronx to Westchester and Connecticut, but also many of the commuters from Westchester here into the Bronx, into the city of New York. This right here is one of the hubs, one of the job-generating engines, the Hutch Metro section, or the whole Hutch Metro Center, that would strongly benefit from one of these 4 stations. And so without further more to say, I just want to bring up my partner in government, someone who truly understands this, someone who is lending not only his voice and has lent his voice, but is also advocating for his constituents, his commuters, in making sure that we get these 4 Metro North stations, the county executive, George Latimer.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our debt of gratitude to my friend Ruben Diaz. We did serve together in the Assembly, but his service here as Bronx Borough President has been dynamic. And for those of us in Westchester County, you may think that we don't see what's going on in the Bronx and what it looks like today versus the way it used to look. I did my undergraduate work at Fordham University. Catherine Chaffee, who's with us here, is our Director of Communication, also claims Fordham roots as well. And my first job was in the Bronx. My first girlfriend was in the Bronx. So I feel very connected to this county in an everyday fashion. a couple
We
of...
still have a love affair, you and I.
That's right. Yeah, we don't know what it was. But it's very important to understand you're covering stories right now about how the city interacts with the suburbs. And there are other major issues on the table. What you're watching here is a story about city and suburban cooperation on a project that's good for the Bronx and it's good for Westchester County. You're covering stories right now on the need to invest in mass transit. This is an expansion of mass transit in the Bronx that benefits the Bronx, that benefits Westchester, and I might add our friends in Fairfield County, as well as those in Manhattan, because this line will ultimately go to the west side of Manhattan. So we have a common interest here, and that's an important news story as people start to wonder, will the city and the suburbs be at each other's point on some of these issues? What the borough president has done and the other leaders here in the Bronx and those of us from Westchester County that I'm going to introduce in a second is we see the common benefit for opening up this line, which will add 4 stations in the East Bronx and connect us to Penn Station on the west side of Manhattan. And as Ruben said, it will provide benefits both directions. People who live in Westchester County who will work in this area. I talk to people all the time who pass by this complex on the Hutch, and they say, if I could just commute every day, I could drive to a train station in Portchester or Larchmont or Mamaroneck or Rye, take a train and come right off at this stop, or the other stops that are planned in the East Bronx, and have access to where I work. And for people who live in these areas who might work in a New Rochelle or at a Portchester or get transit from Portchester to one of the corporate offices in Westchester County. And the opening of transit from Bronx and Westchester to the west side of Manhattan is very important. Our friends on Long Island are going to have access to the east side of Manhattan through their East Side Access Project. Those of us north of the city in the Bronx, in Westchester and Fairfield, we want to have access to the west side to complement that access that we have already into Grand Central Station. This is good for the economy of the Bronx. This is good for the economy of Westchester County. This is a story of mass transit, and it's a story of cooperation between the suburbs and the city. And the leadership of the borough president is essential to this as part of this process. That's why we're happy to be a partner. I'm joined today by Westchester County legislator Nancy Barr, who represents some of the suburban communities along the Sound Shore that would be served by the New Haven line that would then be connected down. We also have, as was already introduced, a person that both Ruben and I share in respect and responsibility, the president of Mercy College, Tim Hall. They have a main campus in Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry, but they also have a significant presence right here in the Hutchinson Metro Center. And he is with us here today. And of course, Joe Kelleher we share as well. Simone Development has been a dynamic developer in the Bronx, a dynamic developer in Westchester County. And Joe and I were a few years apart. Joe's a little younger, but we were classmates in Mount Vernon a long time ago when we grew up in the same community. And if I've missed anybody else from my team to introduce, we'll make sure they have a chance to say a few words. But there are some important Bronx elected officials who are going to say a few words. I'll let Ruben introduce them. I've had the pleasure of serving with many of them in the state office as we come together on these issues.
Thank you, George. Thank you. We appreciate your leadership, Mr. County Executive, and we appreciate your voice and your advocacy on this issue. Let me just mention that we are joined by Kevin Riley from the Speaker of the Assembly's office, Carl Hasty. We are also joined by Sophia Sayers, who's representing the governor. Remember that we could not do this alone. And I cannot underscore enough how much of the state legislators have been a part of this. And I want them to come up and say a few words, representing this area in the New York State Assembly. Because they put their money where their mouth is, half of the project has already been fully funded. By the way, I didn't mention that the other stations would be one in Co-op City, one in Hunts Point, one right here across this parking lot, and the other one will be Parkchester Van Ness. But I want to bring up State Assemblyman Michael Benedetto to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. 4 stations. Ruben announced them. That's where they're going to be placed, 2 of which will be in my district. When I got elected 14 years ago, people in Co-op City were talking about the station that they deserve in Co-op City. They were saying it was never going to come. It's coming. I was very proud when Speaker Hasty appointed me several years ago to spearhead the Bronx effort to convince the governor to support these stations. And that, very, very proud that he did, because he realized the economic impact that's coming if those stations come in here. The benefit that's going to benefit the Bronx, Westchester, and Connecticut too. Trains go two ways. It's coming. And the people standing in the way, Amtrak, have got to back off. I've sat for the last 3 months on what was called the Metropolitan Transportation Authority workshop for sustainability, coming up with new ideas to sustain the core of the transportation for this area. And we've come up with many suggestions. We want people out of their cars. We want them in trains. The governor has supported congestion pricing. That's something that may be coming to New York. We want to get people out of cars so they don't have to put up with that. Get us the trains. So we're here today in a unified effort, both the Bronx and Westchester, at what is really one of the great gems, one of the symbols of the rebirth of the Bronx, underneath the tutelage of President Diaz, the great Metro Conference Center that we're in right now. It's a good symbol of the rebirth. This will foster that rebirth. And we thank Hutch Metro Center for being here, for supplying so many jobs to the people in the Bronx. We want it to continue to grow. Step aside, Amtrak, and let us grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. We also want to bring up Assembly Member Natalia Fernandez.
Thank you. Thank you, Borough President, for holding this press conference today. Very important press conference. And thank you to members of the media for coming to listen and to see, with the amount of people here, the need and support behind these projects. I will have 2 stations directly affecting my district, and I cannot wait for those stations to come. The Bronx, New York City, Westchester, moving to Connecticut. We need this advancement. We need the opportunities to travel, to bring new opportunities in, and to push others out to create more. I believe Amtrak is doing a huge disservice to this city and state by holding back this project, and enough is enough. Like every other issue around us, enough is enough. Move forward, let the project happen, and let us grow. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to support this project.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone who supported this while he was in a state assembly, and now he's a state senator, State Senator Luis Sepulveda.
Good afternoon. Thank you for members of the media for being here. When the borough president began the discussion with me in the assembly and the governor's office, I said, tell me, what do I have to do to make this happen? I now have 2 stations in my district. I'll have Hunts Point and I'll have Parkchester. And one of the things that I tried to push heavily as a representative of this area is economic development. And what better plan to integrate the economy of the people in the community that I represent with Westchester and with Connecticut. The best social program in the world of jobs. And I think this will go a long way to creating more economic and job opportunities for people in this community throughout the Bronx. Also look at internally what the benefits are going to have. Your property values are going to rise, especially in Parkchester, an area that is one of my biggest developments that I represent. When you look at Hunts Point, an area that always needs economic development, will continue to have economic development. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to the borough president, who's been so focused on that. That I believe that this is going to be part of his crown jewel achievements, along with the governor's office and the representatives of this area. So I want to thank the borough president, I want to thank the governor, and let them know that I'm going to do whatever I can at the state level and the state senate to make sure that this happens as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Someone who also advocated for this in the assembly, and now he's a city council member, Councilmember Mark Jonai.
Thank you, Borough President. I want to thank the county executive and my colleagues in government from both the Senate and the Assembly. This will benefit not only the 1.4 million Bronxites, but Westchester and the rest of New York City. Too much has already been invested in these 4 Metro-North stations. For Amtrak to hijack or block this now so they can negotiate better terms, but more in their favor, is a major disservice to New Yorkers. We will not stand for it. We've already allocated a large portion of this money. This is the right thing for New York City, for the entire state, and Amtrak had better get on the right track and support this and do what's right and needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Someone who is just got elected this year to the New York State Assembly, and we know that we can count on her, and we are counting on her, and she's already said that she supports this. Our incoming Assemblywoman, Karines Reyes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Borough President, for holding this press conference. As a resident of Parkchester, we have been waiting anxiously for this Metro North station, and it is a vital component to the environmental and the transportation and addressing the economic needs of our communities, but also in New York City as a whole. If we are looking to be a more a city that's more environmentally friendly, we need to make sure that these projects come to fruition. So it's important that Amtrak not just partner with the community in good faith, but they need to be good neighbors, and we demand that of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I say a few words in Spanish, I also want to say that we have so many community leaders. We have our female district leader, Marjorie Velasquez, with us here today. I don't know, with Marjorie, thank you for joining us. Brevemente en el español, yo soy el presidente del condado del Bronx, Ruben Diaz Jr. Me alegro que estoy aquí con tantos de mis colegas, no solamente del gobierno, sino también negociantes, representando a la universidad aquí en este hogar, en este sector. Me alegro también que tengo una colega, el ejecutivo del condado de Westchester, George Latimer, que está con nosotros, y no la primera vez que George está aquí visitándolo en el Bronx. Él se ha unido con nosotros para pedirle a Amtrak que apoyen las 4 estaciones de tren que nosotros queremos, que ya ha apoyado el gobernador, la legislatura, el MTA y Metro North. Pero lamentablemente, aunque ya vemos tanto apoyo aquí, tantos oficiales electos, aunque ya los recursos están ahí, aunque ya tenemos otros condados que saben el valor económicamente de tener estas estaciones, los dueños de los rieles son Amtrak, y ellos siguen, cada vez que ya vamos a terminar con las negociaciones, siguen pidiendo más. Eso es algo que no debe de ser. Están metiéndose enfrente de progreso, y estamos aquí unidos en una voz, pidiéndole a Amtrak que apoyen estas 4 estaciones de tren, que apoyen el futuro, que apoyen con nosotros el deseo de mejorar no solamente nuestros condados, sino la ciudad de Nueva York, la situación de transportación pública, de crear trabajo, crear vivienda, y que se una a estos esfuerzos. With that, I want to bring up George Latimer again, so you can bring up your Westchester
Thank you.
team.
Buenos tardes, mi amigos. Gracias. Gracias. We have Nancy Barr with us, who is a member of the Westchester County Legislature, which is equivalent to the New York City Council. When we make decisions as a county government, our Board of Legislators joins us as the legislative branch. So Nancy represents a district that is along the Sound Shore, and I'd like for her to say a few words on behalf of the county legislators who support this project.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to stand here with our Westchester neighbors in the Bronx because it is really so important that we work together on things like this. And these new developments would really help districts in Westchester, because right now many people who need to get into the city from Westchester travel by car, because it is too burdensome to have to travel by train This would really make a difference for many of my constituents. In addition to that, I am the chair of the Environment, Health, and Energy Committee for the county legislature, and clearly this is the type of project that is really important for the environment. And as you know, we all share the same environment, whether we're in Bronx or in Westchester, and my colleagues and I are very excited to have something that would be so helpful to us in trying to improve the environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have two more speakers. The visionary developer of this complex and many others is with us, Joe Simone of Simone Development.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. George, who we go way back for a very long time, the Bronx Borough President, thank you, and everyone here attending. I can't tell you how important this is, not only for this community, but for all the communities that go in either direction. So we take this very seriously. It's extremely important to all of us. I thank you all for coming and showing up, and thank you so much. Thanks.
And finally, the president of Mercy College. We've mentioned campuses in Dobbs Ferry right here in the Bronx, President Tim Hall.
Thank you to the county executive and the borough president and the other political leaders here today. I'm a college president, which means I'm in the future business. That's what we're preparing every day, are the people who are going to fill the jobs of the future. We're doing our part by trying to hold tuition down to create excellent circumstances for our students. But I'll tell you, there's another problem for our students. We have them in Westchester, Manhattan, Yorktown Heights, and Dobbs Ferry, and they're traveling back and forth trying to take advantage of all the courses we're offering in lots of places. That's putting a lot of cars on the road, putting a lot of students paying a lot of money to travel. So the future is helping our students get their degrees, helping them get to the courses. It's time for class to start right now. They need help getting here. This project will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
And last but not least, before we take questions, I just want to say that we appreciate that Joe Simone is here. Remember that he took a chance in the Bronx in this parcel many, many years ago, and other parcels as well. When folks thought that he was crazy, when no one wanted to come here, not only has he revitalized this area, not only did he bring this flag hotel, this flagship here, which is doing extremely well, but in the future, we're going to continue to work together to grow. And so that's why this station here, as well as the other three, is so desperately needed. But to speak on behalf of the overall business community in the Bronx, representing the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, the new Executive Director, Lisa Soren.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. You know, I hear everyone saying how they represent two stations and so on. The Bronx Chamber of Commerce represents all stations across the tri-state because this is so important. It's about keeping the jobs here. It's about thriving businesses. Our job is to assist these businesses with the help of our electeds, our colleges. We need these stations for our businesses and our residents. And I implore Amtrak, with the support of every business here in the county, we're behind this and we need it for our businesses. And I thank you. Thank you.
Lisa. Questions?
Why are you so convinced that it's Amtrak that's holding this up? Why does the MTA deserve your benefit of the doubt in the negotiations when so many riders and commuters are fed up with the way the MTA manages their business?
Well, because MTA already supports it, so does Metro North, and the money is already there. Amtrak are the owners of these rails. So every time that the MTA and Metro North negotiates with Amtrak, and by the way, they have negotiations in other parts of the city as well. So the MTA is already paying in billions of dollars to Amtrak based on those negotiations. But every time they're ready to come to the table and sign, Amtrak wants to renegotiate. So for instance, there is a bridge over by Bronxdale Avenue, closer to the site where the Parkchester Van Ness station. That bridge has to be redone in the next 10 years. With or without these 4 Metro North stations. And yet, when MTA, who's in the negotiations and they want to go, and pay for a portion of that bridge, Amtrak now says, no, you got to pay 100% of the bridge. That is not fair. So in this case, and by the way, we'll have plenty of time in press conferences to beat up on the MTA. But in this case, on the 4 Metro North stations, the MTA has been right. Metro North has been right. The governor has been right. The state legislature, county executives, community boards, community leaders and activists. Right now, we have a petitioning campaign where we have close to 5,000 signatures already from Bronx residents and from beyond. The only one who's wrong is Amtrak. I'm convinced.
What's the holdup?
Again, the holdup is they negotiate. So it's the first half. So the 4 Metro North stations will be about $1.3 billion. That's if we stay on schedule. And that's the reason there's this sense of urgency here. We've seen this movie before, where there's a delay, and then it costs more. And then so the holdup is that every time they're about to sign, Amtrak, understanding that they own the tracks, they still have that antiquated mentality, like I said, of railroad robber barons. They think they play Monopoly. Well, you know what? This is not Reading. This is not Short Line. This is not BNO. This is not Pennsylvania. This is the Bronx. This is Westchester. This is the city of New York, and they need to get with it.
What do they tell you, though?
They don't tell me anything. They tell, they haven't responded to us directly. What they say is to the media. When the last time that we made some noise here, what they tell the MTA is, okay, we want to get this done, we want to get this done. Well, but every time they are about to move forward, oh, but we need something else. Oh, we need you to pay for this. We need you to pay for that. Enough is enough already. And just sign on the dotted line. Yes.
How far behind are you, and can the city or MTA do anything to convince Amtrak to just do it?
Well, we're all trying to do it together, and obviously, right now, the only thing the MTA and Metro North can do, and more so than the city, is to give away the whole monopoly board, and we can't do that either. And so what we need is for them now during this 5-year plan, so that we can continue to have the funding in the next 5-year plan, so it doesn't get more expensive, is for Amtrak to sign now based on how the MTA and the Metro North has already negotiated with them in earnest.
And let me just add, we have some powerful allies as well in the federal legislative body that we have. With the U.S. House of Representatives changing hand, Nita Lowey, who's a Westchester congresswoman, is now the head of the Appropriations Committee. And we think that Amtrak is going to want to listen very carefully to what the chair of the Appropriations Committee may have to say. We have Elliot Engel and Jerry Nadler and Nydia Velasquez, who are all chairs of committees in that House majority, and we think that's very important. And Hakeem Jeffries is a very powerful congressman now in the House leadership. And we have in Chuck Schumer, the minority leader of the Senate, and Kirsten Gillibrand, a powerful senator, all of whom are on the side of this as well. And so the message to Amtrak is that there is movement for this, not just at the local levels of government, but within the legislature of the federal government. This is truly a cooperative effort in every way that it can be. And we think that that natural negotiation, if you've ever bought a used car from somebody, you negotiate. You bought a house, you negotiate. But at the end of the day, this negotiation has to come to closure. And some of that pressure, we think, will be in Washington as well as at the local level.
Thank you for that point, George. Before the fact is that Chuck Schumer has been on record and has written letters to them as well, and has had conversations with them. But George, he wants to ask a question.
Yes, Tony.
Please excuse the enlightened self-interest, but there is a feeling in the South Shore communities that this project will help home values in New Rochelle, in Rye, in Harrison, in Larchmont, up and down the line, because people who need to commute to Penn Station, that part of Westchester will now be an option versus, say, New Jersey or Long Island. Are you hearing this?
Yes, yeah, we are hearing that. In fact, many times when people determine where they're going to live, it depends on where their job is in the city. If they're working in Manhattan, I have at 2 different times in my career worked on various parts of the west side, officed on the west side of town. You go into Grand Central Station, you have to commute across and go up and down on the west side. An access to Penn Station is advantageous for those of us who live in the Bronx or live in Westchester County and can reach that part of Manhattan as well. Now keep in mind, our friends on Long Island are very shortly going to have access to the east side of town as well as the traditional west side of town that they've had at Penn Station. The number of trains from the LIRR that's going to go into Grand Central Station is going to open up track space and platform space at Penn Station. And that is where the additional trains coming from the Bronx and Westchester will platform and will be able to put travelers into it. And we think that makes this side of the Bronx a much more attractive place for people to move to, and our portion of Westchester County a more attractive place to move to. So it has the added advantage for us of getting to the west side of Manhattan over and above the interconnection between the Bronx, Westchester, and up to Stamford, Connecticut.
Very quickly, I've just been reminded by my trusting staff that, just to answer your question about how far we're behind, well, the engineering was supposed to begin in April of this year. So, and nothing, there's not even an agreement yet. So that's number one. Number two, we in the Bronx, we appreciate the increase in property value as well, and we understand that as well. And look, we did a report in 2013 with the Senate. And back then, we in our report, it spoke of the potential of having over 5,400 jobs created with these 4 Metro North stations. $1.5 billion private dollars invested around the 4 stations. Residential property value up to $142,000 per lot. Condos up $70,000, and that was this was 5 years ago. And by the way, let me just also say this, that this will also create an alternative route. Should there be some unfortunate chain of events or natural disaster, back in Sandy, when on the west side, the Metro North could not move, everything was at a standstill and devastated. This could create that alternative route. Bob.
Okay, 2 questions. Since most of these trains originate in Connecticut, why is Connecticut not in on this? And the second part to both Borough President and the County Executive, the Hudson Line the Hudson Line wants to go over the Amtrak bridge that burned down basically as one track. Any comment on that? Tie both bridges together.
I don't have much information about the bridges, but in terms of Connecticut, they've shown interest on this. We can give you some of the letters of elected officials over there and community and business leaders over there. The former governor of Connecticut was also interested in this. So they just couldn't make it here today. This was we wanted to show a sister county effort here today.
County Executive Latimer.
Yeah, I can comment on that if you'd like. There is support for this in Connecticut. Obviously, their structure of government doesn't have a single regional executive as you have a borough president or a county executive. There's a new administration coming in, the Lamont administration in Connecticut. We'll be reaching out to them. Our director of operations, Joan McDonald, is previously served in a prior cabinet in Connecticut. So we look forward to meeting with the Lamont administration, and we expect they'll be very supportive of this for the same reasons that a Westchester person would appreciate it. It is access from Greenwich to Stamford and the connections above to the west side of Manhattan. So we expect to have Connecticut support as well. As far as the bridge on the west side of the Bronx going into Manhattan, we would support a route that would allow for Amtrak service into Penn Station down the Hudson River. And if that can be accomplished as a capital project involved, to the extent that our county and the city of New York and the MTA, however that's done, that would be helpful. But anyone who gets on a station on the Hudson line in Westchester or the Bronx that has access to the west side of Manhattan, that would be an advantage as well for us.
I didn't want to speak to that because I don't want to negotiate against ourselves right now. I want to get this one done. Let me just go to him first. David?
How worried are you guys that this project is just going to dissolve?
We're not worried.
Question for Assemblywoman-elect Diaz. You mentioned that you're a commuter. You live in what? Did you say Parkchester?
Parkchester, yes.
Will you come to the mic for a second?
Sure.
Can you just? Am I right? You're a nurse also, or
Yes.
Can you just give us a sense, as a person who uses the service, what it would mean, the difference? Like, what would you currently have to do versus what you would do if it was Metro North? What's your current commute versus what it would be?
So Parkchester, we're very fortunate that we do have the 6 train line, and it is an express stop. Parkchester is actually the second most transited train station in the Bronx. And with that said, it also talks about the need for more access to transportation. We also have an express bus line that people use readily. But we have a very densely populated community. And another access to transportation, I think, is much needed. It would mean cutting many people's commutes in half, or maybe better than that. And it would mean access to Westchester through public transportation as well, rather than just the city.
When you look at the scoping sessions and the studies done by Metro North and MDMTA, they have it so that someone, by the way, the East Bronx is a transportation desert, and it would have it so that we can have people get to Penn Station in about 30 minutes to 35 minutes, or the reverse commute up to Connecticut, Hartford, maybe in 40, 45 minutes. But what we also know is the value of spending time with your family. Someone in Co-op City, for them to get to Penn Station would take north of an hour and a half. Imagine if they're able to get there and shave an hour of their time. That's 2 hours per day that they can spend with their family. You can't put a monetary value on that. And yeah, we need to make sure that this happens quickly.
Amtrak is saying they have met with the MTA several times.
Yes.
They don't want this to adversely impact their own expansion plans. They're looking to expand, I believe, the New York Boston line, the SL line, and there's other things that have to be put into consideration before this moves forward.
Yes. That they should also put the consideration of New York City commuters and Westchester County commuters, people who see their trains zip through our borough every single day, multiple times, and never make a stop here. And so we should be part of that equation.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that, Michelle? I think Amtrak, when they do their rider studies, they should calculate how many people who live in Parkchester, who live in Co-op City, will be able to get on a commuter train to New Rochelle and then access that Amtrak line north and south. They can't do that now unless they drive and find parking in New Rochelle, and Amtrak will grow its ridership to its benefit if it opens up these 4 stations, and someone can get on at any of these locations and then connect in New Rochelle to go north to Boston.
Can I ask, why aren't you worried? You told them you're not worried, but why?
Because I know that this is going to happen. The question becomes whether it's going to happen in a way where we can be on schedule, we're already behind schedule, and whether it's going to take even more money. So time is of essence. I believe, I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic.
How much money has been appropriated so far?
About $800 million, and that would take us to the first 1.5 phase. And in the next 5-year capital plan, the money will be there to close that gap. But that's provided that we hurry up and it doesn't become more expensive.
So I understand your optimism that the MTA is stretched in all kinds of ways. Are you worried at some point to say, we're not going to fight, we're going to take the money, we're going to put it someplace else we need it?
We'll cross that bridge if we ever get to it. But no, this money is going to Metro. This is different. This is a different pot of money that's already been allocated. It's already been designated. And by the way, with all of the concerns on the MTA and New York City Transit, this will help alleviate some of that. There are so many people who will then take this New Haven line into Penn Station that would allow for the overcrowding on the 2, on the 5, on the buses, on the 6 train, and alleviate some of that so that we can then start addressing that. But this is money that's independently assigned already from the 5-year capital plan to the MTA region part of the budget that goes to Metro North.
But if it's not spent, do they move in the next budget to reallocate?
We are here to push, to nudge Amtrak so that we can move forward so we could spend the money. We're not at that scenario. We're not near that yet, but it is, we need to make sure that they hurry up and sign the dotted line and let's move forward.
Let me make one other point, too. There's a precedent, in a sense, for what's happening here. If you go back a number of years, the New Haven line of the MTA Metro North line did not stop at Fordham. For many years, only the Harlem line that went through the center of Westchester County did. And a number of years ago, and it was complicated, they talked about the switching tracks that needed to be adjusted in the Wakefield section. We were given 50 reasons why it couldn't be done. Finally, it was accomplished. You look now at the amount of traffic that comes out of Westchester that gets off of that Fordham stop. Some of it are people going to the college, but there are also people who work in the Bronx, people who have other kinds of activity and business in the Bronx. That has exploded because we simply made something available that wasn't available before. What we're talking about here is simple. The tracks go right through these areas. You're building a station next to those tracks, and you're creating a system by which a certain number of trains a day going north and going south will use this route through Hellgate into Penn Station. It's not that complicated. There are elements of every negotiation. One of the executives with Simone Development is here, Kevin Plunkett, and he is a former deputy county executive in Westchester County. These things are made very clear over a number of years, but now we reach a point where there's cooperation. As I said in the opening, and I'll let this be my close, this is a story of cooperation on mass transit. This is a story of cooperation between the city and the suburbs. And I think that's something that you haven't heard much of, and that makes this a unique project that needs to happen as soon as possible.
That's it. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank all of my colleagues, Mr. President Hall. Thank you, Joe Simone, Lisa Soren, and all the good folks from the Chamber of Commerce. Happy New Year. Happy holidays all. Thank you. Thank you for coming.